Hi people, it's me, Anja. My pronouns are she and her, and welcome back to my channel for a new video. I've made a few videos in the past talking about my favorite Sapphic Asian books, but today I wanted to specifically focus on my favorite Sapphic South Asian books, just because I feel like there's less South Asian representation than East Asian representation, and I would argue with no evidence that's due to colorism. And also, this video was perfect because May is AAPI month in the United States, which includes South Asia. And I feel like a lot of people, when they think about Asia, they only think about East Asia, which is so unfair. So anyway, here we go. I hope that this video helps diversify your bookshelf. So the first book on this list is called All the Yellow Suns. This story is a YA contemporary following a queer Indian American main character who's exploring identity and activism through art. I absolutely love this book so much. I think it's so excellent and it's so well done. I love the plot. I got very wrapped up in the characters and like the group dynamic very, very quickly. I love the romance. I love the Sapphic representation, the plot and the art elements, and everything all together is absolutely so amazing and so well done. The writing is excellent. I actually don't know if this author has more books out now or not. I don't know. I think I read this book like either last year or the year before. But anyway, it's so good and I love the writing and the pacing and everything about it. So anyway, with that said, I would definitely highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called The Dew and Donuts of Love. This story is a YA contemporary following a plus-size Bangladeshi main character who's entering into a televised baking competition with contestants including her ex-girlfriend as well as her new crush. This story is absolutely so fantastic and it's so good. I truly, no pun intended, ate it up. Like, I think it's excellent and it's so wholesome and it's so good. I love the competition setting. I love the plot and the characters and the romance. And, like, everything about it was so wholesome and just so good and just so lighthearted. This book is definitely more lighthearted than some of the other recommendations on this list, but I would say that it's so excellent and it's so lovely and splendid, and I just really enjoyed it from the beginning to the end. Like, it's so lovely and wonderful. And honestly, like, I think it's one of the author's better books, frankly. I think it's definitely her best YA contemporary book. So anyway, with that said, I would definitely highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called Afterlove. This story is a YA paranormal contemporary because it follows an Indo-Guyanese main character who's missing her ex-girlfriend in the afterlife. Does that make any sense? This book was marketed as the lesbian love story that you've been dying to read, which is so absolutely accurate, and it's so true. This story was so good. I loved the world building and the characters and the plot and the lesbian representation and the romance, and everything about it was so good and so well done. I'm so glad that I picked up this book maybe 4 years ago, I think is when I read it, because it's so excellent. I just really enjoyed it, and honestly, I also think this book is so underrated. I think the author is also British, which is part of the reason why I think it's so underrated, since I feel like British YA tends to fly under the radar most of the time, unless you're really popular like Alice Oseman. But anyway, this book was so good, and it's so excellent. I loved literally every single element. So anyway, with that said, I would definitely highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called Rana, Joon, and the One and Only Now. This story is a YA contemporary following a young Iranian-American main character who is honoring her deceased friend's legacy by entering a rap contest. And it's set in 1996, so I guess technically it's historical fiction. But anyway, this book was so good, and I really enjoyed it. I love stories that center on rap music or like poetry or anything in the arts, honestly, because I think it's so interesting and so cool as like a hobby, you know, in general. But anyway, this book was so good, and I really appreciated the writing and the pacing and the characters and the queer representation. Some reviewers have critiqued this book, by saying that it's historically inaccurate, but as someone who doesn't really know much about the history of the 90s, like, I could ignore that. You know what I mean? But anyway, this book was so good. I really, really loved, like, the conversation surrounding, like, grief and, like, that side of it. And I loved the characters because they feel like real people and real teenagers. And I loved the rap parts of it. Like, this book was so good and it was so lyrical. And I just really, really enjoyed it so much. So anyway, with that said, I would definitely highly, highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called Messy Perfect. This story is a YA contemporary following a South Asian Sapphic main character who starts an underground GSA at her conservative Catholic school. This story is absolutely so fantastic and it's so good. And honestly, I wonder if I would have joined the GSA if I had gone to a public high school, but I'm not quite sure, partly because I was homeschooled and partly because I didn't realize that queerness, for lack of a better word, was an option until I was around 15. But anyway, I digress. This book was absolutely so awesome and so well done. I loved the characters, the queer representation, like the setting, the friendships, the plot, the pacing, the writing. Everything about this book is absolutely so good and it's so well done. And I loved the main character so much. Her strive for perfection, hence the title, was portrayed so much. And I loved her arc. Like, this book is absolutely so good and it deserves all of the hype and so much more. And I think it's so excellent and it's so authentic and it's so good. So anyway, with that said, I would definitely highly, highly recommend it. The last book on this list, and certainly not the least, is called Lovely, Dark, and Deep. This story is a YA dark academia urban fantasy following a Sapphic Filipino main character who is exploring grief, loneliness, and the power of found family as well as magic. This story is absolutely so fantastic and it's so good. And I'm describing this book as dark academia because it's set in an academic setting. And I feel like sometimes dark academia gives off the expectation that the story challenges academia in some way. But I feel like that's a stereotype because honestly, all that dark academia means is that it's set in an academic setting, not necessarily that the story challenges something in academia. You know what I mean? Sometimes dark academia stories do challenge something in academia, such as predominantly white schools or something like that. However, it doesn't have to be, because all that dark academia means is that it's set in an academic setting. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? But anyway, all stories that challenge academia are automatically in an academic setting, and those books are often more popular than books that don't necessarily do that, which is why I think dark academia has that reputation, but it's not a necessarily facet to the genre, in my opinion. But anyway, this book was so good. It was so excellent and it was so well done. I loved the magical boarding school setting. I loved the magic. I loved, like, the characters and the found family and the queerness and the friendship and the exploration of grief and everything. This book is so good. It is so excellent and it's so well done and it deserves all of its hype and so much more. And I think it's truly one of my favorite queer books that I've read this year, which I don't know if that says a lot yet, because I don't know how many queer books I've truly read this year. Honestly, I think I've read 120 books this year so far. But anyway, this book was so good, and I truly, really, really enjoyed it from the beginning to the end. I think it's so excellent. I love the pacing and the plot and the writing and literally every single element. So anyway, with that said, I would definitely highly, highly recommend it. So in conclusion, I hope that this video helps diversify your bookshelf, and happy AAPI month to anyone who celebrates. For those who don't know, AAPI stands for Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And with that said, that includes the entire continent of Asia. So please remember to include South Asian voices this month and every month of the entire year. But anyway, if you enjoy this video, please don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below the cheese emoji if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!